Welcome to the 10th edition of Open Forum New York, Why Crazy About K-Pop. My name is Lanzot, as Seokhyun said. I have been working on Korean culture education programs for over a decade, and I've been a fan of K-pop since 1998. So I'm very happy to be here tonight. I am honored and delighted to introduce our panel speakers this evening. First up, we have Jeff Benjamin from Billboard. Forbes and Billboard contributor Tamar Herman. Joining us from NYU, Dr. Heijin Lee. And last but not least, courtesy of Born Star, Enmanuel. All right, please have a seat. So thank you all for coming tonight. I'm excited to talk about K-pop. Before we get into our questions, I'd like to ask you to each introduce your background, what your current work or projects are, and what your connection to K-pop is. And just reiterate your name for the audience, please.
Hello, I'm Jeff Benjamin. I've been a journalist here based in New York since graduating NYU in 2012. Been writing about K-pop for Billboard since 2011, writing for places like New York Times and Rolling Stone and Forbes and beyond, and just started simply as a strong interest in K-pop when YouTube started getting more popular, and when I was looking for something as a fan of lots of different kinds of music and music around the world, looking for something that was interesting to me and exciting to me. And it was just very, very good timing. K-pop was getting more traction in America specifically. I was interning at Billboard at the time, and we were starting to see the first elements of crossover here in America, and it was just very, very exciting. And slowly but surely, I got just kind of lots of cool opportunities to write about K-pop and be able to speak about it when there weren't a lot of opportunities, and just try to keep it growing. And we've since been able to expand K-pop, and it's at an amazing place now. And we're here today to discuss it even more. So awesome to meet you guys.
Thank you, Jeff. Tamar?
Hi everybody, my name's Tamar Herman. I'm a Billboard and Forbes contributor. I've been writing about K-pop since 2013, and along with Billboard and Forbes, which are my primary outlets, I've written for everything from like NBC, MTV. If you saw the Netflix series Vox Explained, I was in the K-pop episode of that. I have a really big project that's probably going to be announced in the next 2 weeks coming up, so stay tuned. I'm really excited. I got into K-pop when I was in high school. It was around the time that Jeff mentioned that YouTube was helping K-pop's international ascent, and I fell hard, and I ended up I went to the CUNY honors program at Macaulay Honors College, and one of my advisors one day heard me and a friend listening to K-pop and was just like, "Why aren't you taking Korean class?" I was like, "Well, I don't have any career path. Why would I take a Korean class?" And in the end, I ended up switching my major to East Asian Studies, and I started writing about K-pop actually when I was studying abroad in Seoul. And so it was kind of by accident. And so now here we are, and it's been a really great honor being able to help write the narrative of what K-pop's future is in the US, and I'm really excited to see what's happening next.
Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Heijin Lee. I teach at New York University. My interest in K-pop is totally accidental. It's rare to be like, I'm going to be a professor of pop culture or, of K-pop specifically. But I started out researching actually plastic surgery in South Korea. In the early 2000s, when I started my graduate degree, there were a lot of news stories around Korean women are consuming plastic surgery at the highest rates, and they all want to look like white people. And as a Korean American, I knew that that was not true. I had never met another Korean person that was like, I want to look white, you know. So it was a very simple sort of research question, right? I just wanted to sort of speak against these mainstream news stories. And as I was studying and researching, Korean beauty and pop culture really came to sort of intersect with one another. And so now I'm writing a book about plastic surgery, but of course it has to also do with Korean pop culture because the two are very much linked in the way that Korea is represented through its pop culture industry. I am also co-editing a anthology called Pop Empires about Korean pop culture, Hallyu, and also Bollywood, right? These sort of two similarly global pop cultural formations. So this anthology puts some of the scholarship on both of these two pop cultural formations together. And then another anthology called Fashion and Beauty in the Time of Asia, about how fashion and beauty have really come to signify what people are calling the Asian century, and the way in which Asia is being represented. So that's really my interest in pop culture. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
Hi. Hi. All right. So my name is Liminal Adams, and I'm from Dominican Republic. My history, it's a little crazy because I'm actually college graduate in something that's nothing has to do with music. Since young, I wanted to become a musician, but coming from a like undergraduate, like subculture, because Dominican Republic is really poor. I couldn't just tell my dad like, hey, I want to be a musician. No, most likely they would like, you have to go med school, maybe lawyer, or be a teacher. That's it. So I went to the med school. I finished everything, but my passion for music was always there. Even in college, I was like in all choirs and in other church and everything. I love performing, I love singing, I love dancing, I love fashion too. I even graduated from modeling. But then when I get into K-pop by coincidence also, my friend showed me a drama, a K-drama, which is actually really popular in the culture.
Which one?
You Are Beautiful. Oh, yeah, girl. So that's how it started, A lot of time the dramas has OST and mainstream artists. And when I knock with them, like, oh my God, they are so great and amazing. And I kind of felt some way to express my feelings to become also a performer. Later, I ended up performing with groups and friends in events in Dominican Republic. Meantime, I was also in choirs, in classical singing. I did my demo, and then I finished college, and guess what? I'm gonna pursue my career now because mom and daddy not anymore supporting. Now I can do my own. So I came to America with my demo, and that's how I started training at Born Star. Over there, I was taking singing, dancing, getting confidence, performing at different venues and events, Chuseok, Murray Hill, New Jersey, different festivals, connecting with Korean culture. I don't know, like feeling some passion because it just, when you love K-pop, you don't really see differences because everybody most likely will be different from each other. You got like African American, Korean, Chinese, Japanese. We have a lot of people, and as soon as you connect with K-pop, European too, Dominican too, everyone. So definitely, it was just like one love. So it's been like about like 9 years probably or more since I get into the Korean culture. I never thought at that time that I would be pursuing a career later on that. And today I've been even the office manager for a Korean training center when I'm not total. Like I don't have not even one hair because this is Afro. I don't have even one hair of Asian. And just being able to connect with that community and express my love for it, it's amazing. It's amazing.
So when we think about K-pop, we think Korean pop music, but it's more than that. It's not just a genre of music. So starting from Dr. Lee and anyone who wants to add, can you please define K-pop? What makes it more than just pop music with Korean lyrics?
Define K-pop. That's a big thing to define. I think a couple things have already been mentioned, right? The training system, and we have an expert here, so I won't go into that too much. I think we'll touch on that. But some of the sort of bigger picture things that I think make it really unique is the way that it travels out, right? And that's what we're interested in. Why crazy about K-pop, as this panel is entitled. Several of the stories up here have already hit on the fact that it's this moment, right, when YouTube is getting big, right? It's about the end of 2009 where the global dimensions of K-pop start to emerge. And I think, South Korea is the most wired nation in the world, and that is reflected in its marketing strategies, right? So that sort of rabbit hole you go into when you are surfing on YouTube and you don't come up for like 6 hours, right? And you started by watching a BTS video, but you ended up watching a drama and a film. Along the way, you saw 9,000 commercials for beauty products and water heaters and cars, things totally unrelated to K-pop. But by the time you've come up for air, it's not just that you've become a K-pop fan, you've become a fan of South Korea. Right? It's the way that South Korea is branded in its culture, and that it's totally intentional, right? That the government really set out in the mid-90s to export culture, right? The president famously said, right, the revenue of Jurassic Park equaled 1.5 million Hyundai cars, right? It's like, what are we doing here? And you see some, 20 years later, the real fruits of that labor, I think. And what's unique about K-pop is that the K-pop star in this current moment is the glue that holds together all of these seemingly unrelated industries, right? The K-pop star can hold together cuisine and beauty and automobiles and water heaters and all of it together, and it's really hinging on this sort of youthful representation of South Korea that is now a global brand of the nation. And so I think that's what's really interesting and poignant about K-pop in this current iteration, because of course it's, Luz, you were saying like you've been a fan since the late 90s, right? It's been around for much longer, but in this current moment, I think that's what really makes it unique. So I'll just start with that.
Thank you. Would you like to add anything?
So as you were talking, you were talking about how like the K-pop stars sell everything, and I actually wrote my my college thesis on how K-pop is a transmedia narrative of like an industry. So like when we talk about K-pop, I never like to call it a genre. It has slipped out, I will say that, but it's really the industry and the storytelling aspect of it. So for those who don't know, transmedia is like a way of telling the same story across different platforms, and you need to kind of accumulate all of it. So like big industries, big media contents that like are affiliated with transmedia is like Star Wars, where like you have the books and you have the movies and you have the video games and you have the board games, and a really diehard fan wants to take it all in, like comic books, Marvel. A lot of TV shows like Lost was a big one that like they had websites that like you had to go find hints on and stuff. So K-pop does this really well in a very nuanced way, where like you have like, as you mentioned cuisine, and I was just thinking of all the cooking shows that we've been seeing K-pop stars participate in. We see all the beauty trends. I just came back from Seoul, and like friends asked me to pick up cosmetics that were being advertised by K-pop stars, but they weren't actually on the packaging, and there was no like aspect of the packaging that was like, Red Velvet has a line with Etude House right now, but it's not like they're called like Red Velvet Cupcake, like something, like it's just their faces on the store. Like there's absolutely no connection to these K-pop stars once you buy the product. But these friends of mine were like, oh, we want that. Like they're advertising it. They look cute. They look really good in those colors. I'm like, oh, okay. And this is something that a lot of people have, like, was it you? I like a lot of K-pop stars wear a lot of earrings, and I really like earrings. And so like Liz commented like, oh, you didn't buy any earrings in Seoul. I'm like, no, I like withheld myself. Like even I'm someone who's been following this for years and analyzing it for years, and I still am like, oh, the advertising is really strong. Like it's not just like, I'm not just buying albums. And the albums are a whole other element of things where you're not buying the music, you're buying the content. And like nowadays we have ones that are like, I think Twice had one that was a board game, and EXO had one that was a comic book. So if you bought more copies, you got different pages of the comic book. So we're seeing all these really nuanced ways where these companies are marketing their stars, they're not just selling music, they're literally selling, as you said, like South Korea and all of its products.
And even the music itself, I mean, we haven't been like playing any K-pop today, but I'm sure if you've heard a K-pop song or 2 or 5 or 5,000, they don't they're not connected by any type of and I say the exact same thing when people talk about K-pop as a genre. I say it's really tough to define K-pop as a genre because I think we all know, there are elements that define the hip-hop genre or the rock genre or dance genre. But with K-pop, they combine all these elements, all these different musical elements that every group, every team, there's like singing elements, there's rapping elements, there's a dance section. It's not defined by one sound or one type of music, even just in and of itself, the K-pop itself. The music is hardly one thing by any stretch of the imagination. So when you have the actual product, the actual musical product, as being so many dimensions, so many musical notes, in literally and figuratively, there is just so much more to expand on that. So I've always said that it's really tough to define K-pop. I always call it a scene, rather, because you get more into sort of the larger elements that go into music. It's not just about what you hear, it's about how it looks, how it's consumed, how it's portrayed, how it's put out there, how it's put in there, and all those different things.
I think the best way to englobe K-pop is just a movement. It's a South Korean movement. You have music, you have acting, you have culture, you have food, you have beauty, you have everything. Like when you merchandise about K-pop, like you mentioned, it's not about music. It's about the whole total concept. A lot of the time, even artists, to be part or brand as a K-pop artist, they need to make themselves, like from hair to the tippy toe of it, So it's a total movement. Like governmental, politics, because they are all connected somehow, and the consumers are us. It's made for the international fans mostly. A lot of times. No, I was saying that a lot of the times the international are the biggest consumer, most likely, because South Korea is it's a tiny piece of the whole world, and look what BTS and other artists are making. So it's a total movement, K-pop.
A lot of the times when I talk to producers here, because a lot of K-pop songs are produced by international producers, they'll say that the difference between American pop or Brit pop or K-pop, the only thing I guess that they talk about as being the K-pop sound is that it's really well produced. Even if you are from a small company in Korea, your songs are probably gonna be better produced than half of what's coming out in the US, and the same thing is true with music videos. There's just this element of excellence that defines K-pop. If it's not good, it's just not going. Boring is not a way you can describe K-pop.
Boring. Once a K-pop song is about energy, it's about giving life. Boring cannot be congregated in one K-pop song. Otherwise, it's not K-pop.
So I was going to go into this a little later, but since we mentioned genre mixing, Tamar, what do you think are some other cultural aspects of K-pop groups that make them appealing to an international audience, such as the roles of the members or different forms of masculine expression? Could you touch on some of those things?
More the roles of the members. I think that one of the big elements that we've been talking about is that these stars aren't just there to sell the music; they're there to sell a lot of things. So if you ask a fan, they usually don't just take in a K-pop group for their music, but they take them also for their variety shows and their social media and all these elements of who these people are as people or as the people that they're portraying themselves to be. So there is, I guess, an element of your not only becoming the fan of this music, which I think really downplaying K-pop as just music is really a discredit to everything that these stars are doing, because they're working hard on every aspect of their lives. Even at airports or at restaurants, many of them are being followed and they have to act a certain way and they have to portray themselves as these, we call them idols for a reason, and literally they are held to a higher standard in many regards. Careers can be lost for this year we saw a girl group member who was criticized for using a phone case that said, what was it? Yeah, it was Girls Can Do Anything. And another one who mentioned that she read a famous book in South Korea that criticized toxic masculinity in everyday aspects of her life, and she was panned for daring to say she read this potentially slightly feminist book. That this book was literally one of the biggest stories from it that gained a lot of attention was that this woman realized, when somebody said, when a boy was bullying her, oh, it's because he likes you, and she's like, no, that's not right. That's just something you tell little girls, it's okay to be bullied. And for a K-pop star not to be able to say that, that's kind of what these stars have to put up with. There's not a lot of I wouldn't say that there's not a lot of freedom of expression, because in some ways there is, but it's very formulaic. There's a whole lot of packaging that goes into it, and as Liz mentioned, like for the guys especially, like I want to be really careful here, because a lot of times when I've been reading, especially recently with BTS coverage, I've been seeing a lot of descriptors that I'm kind of sitting here like, that sounds a little bit like you're implying that they're not necessarily masculine enough just because they don't fit your, Western idea of masculinity. But I think that one of the great things about K-pop is that it's showing alternatives to, Hollywood. Like you mentioned Bollywood, and I really want to read your books, but like for K-pop, I mean, I remember the first time I went to Seoul, I saw BB cream for guys, and I brought it back for my brother. And I was just like, what do you think of this? Like, it wasn't a real gift. Like, I bought him something else. But I was like, what do you think of this? And he's like, did you buy this at a joke shop or something? I was like, no, they have this in every beauty store. And like, college friends of mine were expected, if they were going on a date. Like, I had a lot of girlfriends there who were like, yeah, if I go on a date and he's not wearing any BB cream, like, why would I date him? I was just like, oh, that's like an interesting like phenomena that's kind of come out of this, is where you expect a different, more pristine element to, just being. Like, there's so much of K-pop that's affecting, especially, I would say, not even just youth in Korea, but like youth internationally now, where you're seeing trends that are coming out of Korea. Like, if you look at Korean fashion, like, you can expect to see that in the US in like a year, maybe 2 years. Sometimes it really takes a while. But Korea is really setting the trends and having, a softer representation of guys than like maybe like American, like Riverdale would portray or something. I think it's really great. You guys can talk about this way more than me.
I mean, even personally, I felt like K-pop. I've been watching it, and it was very frustrating for a while, because I would see a really amazing group like Girls' Generation, who blew my mind with what they were doing in Korea, in Japan, all around Asia. And then I remember hearing that they had signed a record deal in America, that they were signed with a really big record label over here. They're going to start advancing into America. And then it was a very kind of jarring experience, and I think a lot of K-pop fans would agree that the song and the way they were presented during this, sort of American advancement was not necessarily true to what people knew them as and what they had kind of created this entire amazing fandom from in Asia. And it kind of kept happening. There were other groups that did that, other singers that this happened with. And to me, I thought it was such a discredit and such an unfortunate aspect of what was happening, because I was like, this is so popular the way it is. Like, I still remember, like, very early days of, like, I think it was my very first interview with 21, if you guys remember 21. And, yeah, what? Yeah, there you go. He knows. He's a real one. And just these, fans coming out of the woodwork to just even support the fact that, someone... I was, nobody was just tweeting about 21, or that one of the editors at Billboard was tweeting about 4 Minute, or whatever it might be. There were some really amazing, there was this intensity, this passion, and it was there for a reason. And it was clearly because of sort of, what I eventually realized is that it wasn't just about the music. It was about this kind of entire amazing package and sort of passion that kind of came along with sort of these artists and what they were putting out there into the world. So to me, for the longest time, it was like, no, why do I feel like, and I have a lot of theories about why, and it's, the unfortunate fact is that we didn't have a representative Asian pop star. There's not a Middle Eastern pop star, but that's a whole nother story. It's just, representation and diversity is so important, and the fact that we weren't seeing, or that we were seeing these sort of misguided and sort of unfair, in my opinion, attempts to make it, quote unquote, in the American market, when it felt like they didn't have any chance from the get-go, because they weren't staying true to what made them special and what made them unique and what created that passion and that fandom first and foremost. So it's nice now to be able to see that trends or things, they don't need to, quote unquote, cater to quote-unquote Western audiences, is that they're staying very true to themselves. Someone like BTS hardly sings in English, period. We're seeing it's now truly being exported in a way that stays true, I think, to the culture itself.
Yeah, I mean, I think so many amazing points that you guys are making. There's so many that I want to follow up on, but I'll just, two things. I think what's important to keep in mind is that when we talk about how K-pop is produced, and then how it travels, and then how it's received, right? These are all different processes. So in South Korea, we might think about K-pop as a really normalizing force, right? It's very mainstream. But then how it lands in other places is totally different, right? So, you might have the president of Korea saying he, does not support same-sex marriage, let's say, right? And then in that same moment, K-pop is the sort of glue that holds together LGBTQ communities in many different other parts of the world, right? So I think what's really astonishing about K-pop is the way that it's able to be a subculture for so many communities in different places outside of South Korea. And so this has been like an interesting thread that I've heard from a lot of our performers today, right? Like narratives about inclusion, right? That there's a lot of different types of people who are able to participate in K-pop. So it becomes, as you've said, an alternative to American pop that now sort of largely feels very exclusive, right? It's only for a certain group of people. It's very hard to break into. I mean, one would argue that K-pop is also very hard to break into, but there are these, ways, right, that seemingly feels more democratic, I think, to certain groups in the U.S. especially. So I think that to me is really fascinating, the way that it creates these subcultural fandoms. And then the way fans participate, right? We've never had this level of exchange between fans and stars before, certainly not when I was growing up, right? You could only spectate and hope for the next thing to come out. But the way that K-pop stars really respond, as you mentioned earlier, to the sort of work that they're doing, and then the work that the fans are doing, right? The fans are sort of in constant labor, in conversation with their idols, and it's like this really reciprocal relationship. And I think that really leaves people wanting to come back for more, right? Because they really see their own impact on the star and the choices that they're making.
Coming from Latin America and also being influenced by pop music, and then knowing about K-pop, three markets are totally different. I think K-pop and perfection are in the same line. K-pop is made for perfection. There's no space for mistakes. Like in the track, like you were saying, the production, during the stage presence, but also in interviews and live. And I think that makes hard for Korean pop stars getting to other markets, because let's say in Latin America, interview is unexpected. In Korea, an interview is not expected. They know what they're gonna be asked and what they have to say. In America, it's the same. I think that's one of the reasons why K-pop or Korean idols have it hard in American market, most likely, because the way that they market themselves is totally different. I would say they have the chance to be more who they really are, even though it's pre-made and pre-planned in Korea. And when they try to go for the pop market style, I will say that's when they does fail. I will say like that. A lot of artists like now BTS, like you said, he's sticking true to himself. He's performing even though in billboards, MTV and stuff, but he's doing what he likes. He's doing K-pop, and fans love that. I remember a few weeks ago, they are trying to launch this movie, and they were trying to put doubles for the voices in English, and the fans are no, no. I want my subtitles. I want to hear them talking, and that's the thing that it can make K-pop different from pop, I would say, and fans like that. So as long as they keep being like that, I think K-pop is gonna be growing more.
I think you especially touched on this about how fans kind of instill the ideas of how they're receiving K-pop on K-pop. So it's not necessarily that, as you mentioned, a lot of communities around, a lot of LGBTQ communities around the world, take ownership of K-pop in a way, and a lot of, I think, just in general, third culture kids are very find K-pop. Like I found K-pop because I'm an Orthodox Jew. Like surprise, like I ran here after Sabbath ended. Like I wasn't using my phone for the past 25 hours and I thought I was gonna run late. Like I literally was driving my roommate crazy looking at the clock. And like I found K-pop because I was looking for music that didn't like, at the time, like I remember like a lot of American music was really sexy and like full of curses, and like my little like 15-year-old Orthodox Jewish girl was like, I want something else. So joke's on me because now I'm a music writer. But like I think that it doesn't really matter that these K-pop stars, I think, as you said, like a lot of K-pop stars coming to international markets, like they kind of face a little difficulty because they're not used to not having everything planned and not used to having everything, like having things off the cuff is startling to K-pop stars a lot of the time because everything is so, as you said, perfect. And I think that's one of the biggest difficulties that K-pop's actually gonna face internationally, because you can't have, like in America, we really pride ourselves on something honest. Like we love garage bands. Like whenever people ask, why do you think BTS is so popular? Like, well, probably because they kept on coming to the US and like they have underground background. That's essentially the garage band of the K-pop world. Like people want to see themselves in these stars, and I think that it's at some point it doesn't matter what the stars themselves are saying, it's what the fans are seeing, and the fan community is one of the biggest aspects I think that really makes K-pop so special. Like if you ask a K-pop fan, like, oh, so like how do you take in K-pop? Like 9 times out of 10 it's from a social media platform or different social media platforms. Like yeah, there are a few dedicated sites to Korean entertainment, and like now mainstream outlets were covering it all the time, but like still that social media communal finding your group in usually digital spaces, but not always, is such an important element to it. And it really just transcends actually what these stars are saying. Like to some degree, it doesn't matter that there's no K-pop star who, not none, but there's very few K-pop stars saying, yes, I support same-sex marriage. Like it doesn't matter to many fans. Like it doesn't matter to many fans that, there aren't many, if any right now, non-Asian faces in K-pop because the fandom itself is diverse. And I think that's something really cool, but also I think, yeah, it's really hard for K-pop, I think, to break into Western markets because there's this lack of being off the cuff and stuff. But you did see actually in, I think it was in Mexico during Super Junior's recent media tour.
Ooh,
like,
that was funny. I watched that.
Like there was
I
one,
watched that.
The one where like they got kissed. Like there was
keys. I think that even the lady got him seated on his lap. Everything, If they do it in Korea, they're gonna be like, what?
Yeah, but I mean,
life.
they're a group that's 13 years into their career and they're known as entertainers, possibly more so than singers in Korea. And so like, imagine like a baby 1-year-old K-pop group, like they probably would have fainted on the spot.
I swear he will.
It was the best video, go watch it.
So I definitely agree that this kind of community aspect, this subculture, this sense of inclusion, Sam was talking about teamwork, wanting to be part of a group. I think that's very attractive to Americans. And then, the language aspect, there are obviously the names of Korean groups are often either abbreviations for English phrases or something that's very easily recognizable and searchable for international audiences. But there are also these kind of narratives and these story arcs that are involved. And since we keep talking about BTS, can one of you please touch upon how it is that they've used their storytelling to connect with their fans so well?
Okay. So first of all, BTS I think is really, as you mentioned, the name thing is really funny because BTS's name in Korean is Bangtanso년단, which means like they use the rough translation of Bulletproof Boy Scouts. And when BTS came out, I remember everyone was like, what are we calling this group in English? Like I remember people were throwing around Bangtan Boys or I don't remember some of the other ones, but it's like really ironic that they're so popular because BTS is such a popular acronym that it kind of like just undoes everything you think about how K-pop names are made, because most of the K-pop groups, their names are meant to be really, really unique and really, really like kind of surprising. And BTS's, their Korean name definitely is interesting, but their English acronym is so just like, okay, it's cool. So it's just really cool that they kind of have been able to, become so big that it doesn't matter that their name is a really popular like acronym for behind the scenes, and now they've changed their name, meaning not only to stand for Bangtanseongeundan but also to be beyond the scene, because they truly have transcended the K-pop boundaries. But BTS, the big narrative I think that we've definitely seen in 2017 and 2018 especially is based on their Love Yourself album series. They've been really promoting, and I think rightly so, considering that their fan base has people across all ages, genders, races. So it's really not just aimed at younger fans, but again, pop music is always going to have many young fans. So I think it's really great that they're promoting this, and pretty much the Love Yourself series, the whole idea is an exploration of how to love yourself. So they just released, their last album was Love Yourself Answer, and if you look at it, it's divided into 3 parts, each of which, the first one is about, just romantic love. The second one is, heartbreak and finding yourself and the anguish of, just problems. And the third part is that the happiness that you can find in this world is based on loving yourself, and romantic love and exterior love can all come from that. So this is really, nice and inspiring. And they have music that inspires, and they have been promoting this for literally years. They've been promoting this element. They had a campaign with UNICEF that was supporting anti-bullying. They went and spoke at the UN, a kind of a riff off of Love Yourself, which was Speak Yourself, because they were helping to launch a new campaign from UNICEF. UNICEF usually is aimed at children, helping children in impoverished situations, and now UNICEF is expanding to young adults. So this program that they were launching was essentially helping, Gen Zers. What is it? If you're 18 to 21, what are you? I don't know what you are. But essentially helping those older children find their way in the world. So RM, who is the leader of BTS, he was essentially talking about how he pursued his own career by taking time to listen to himself instead of exterior motives about what people around him wanted. And so they're really just, especially recently, driving this narrative of trying to figure out who you are, and they're using the music and they're using their platform to promote this sense of self-awareness and self-love, and that's something that's really resonating with fans. And they've had other messages throughout their music, but this is probably the biggest one that really resonates with people right now.
Fans are such a big influencer for the artists. I tell my kids all the time that I cannot make you famous. Fans are the ones that will decide how far you're going to make it in their career. Of course, the companies, because they are the one investing the thousands of dollars or millions into your career. But at the end of the time, the fans are the one that, they like you or they don't, even if money was expended. And I think that's what happened with this. Is quite surprising. They have such a short career, even though they've been training independently for years. But probably 5-7 years, they don't have that in the market, not even more than 5 years in the market. And they have become such a huge. And then fans are the ones that make them become how big they are. That's why fans like them to stay true to themselves. They don't really like to call BTS by their English name. They want to be called BTS. The same happened with their music, but the same happened with their message. It's funny though that in the beginning, I'm gonna be serious. I wasn't such a big fan at the beginning of BTS because they were more underground, more into kind of little raw, hip hop and street style. And when fans started listening to such a good vocalist they have, they incorporated more pop elements into their style, and that's when worldwide they become so popular and international. Everybody feel accepted because they're so diverse and they love each other. I think that's amazing.
You just reminded me of something I didn't say. So I was just talking about Love Yourself, and BTS actually from their earliest days, whether you liked their music or not, because it was definitely different than what they were doing now. It was very hip hop oriented. From the get-go, their music actually was talking about societal norms specifically in South Korea, but more general also. But they had songs that were addressing, the intense education, the weight of education system that many in South Korea are burdened by. I think I just read yesterday an article about how people in South Korea like spend their entire life taking tests because job interviews nowadays have a test that precedes them for many industries. So after you're finished with schooling, you still have to keep on studying to advance in your career. And I didn't know that. I was looking it up because somebody had told me when I was in Korea that she was taking a test to be a journalist, which like in the US we don't have any licensing exam to be a journalist.
We should, but
Jeff's like, we need one.
but we don't.
So my my friend was telling me that she had failed the test for the first time, and I was like, oh, I'm so sorry. And then I asked another journalist, because at first I was like, oh, is it like a normal thing to fail? And my friend was like, yeah, people take that test all the time. It's like someone failing the bar for the first time. Like, these are intense tests. And so that was originally, BTS had several songs that were about this, and they then had a few songs recently that were about like spending culture in South Korea. So they're not just, talking about general philosophical things about like loving yourself, but they're also really weaving in this narrative about being a Korean millennial. And even their most recent single, Idol, it didn't just, draw on, like we were talking about how K-pop, like it doesn't really have a genre, it just draws on a lot of genres. Like it used like pansori and samonori elements in it, and like they were wearing like traditionally inspired, like really distinct hanbok. I never actually saw anybody do a color analysis, but there was some interesting like color themes in the hanbok that they wore. But they really have taken it upon themselves to not only be representing like themselves and youth culture, but Korean culture. And then didn't they just like get medals from the Korean government for like spreading Korea and Korean language? I think it was on like Korea, like Hangul Day. So that was kind of cool. Jeff?
Oh yeah, and I even think industry and commercially wise, we were kind of we were talking a little bit about this a tiny bit, that K-pop in Korea is sort of commercialized, sort of the norm, the standard thing, and BTS came from a very small country. They didn't come with this, or sorry, small company rather. Korea it's a small country, yes, but there was no silver spoon in their mouth. There was definitely the idea that they had to work for everything that they had to prove. I think RM in the UN speech talked a bit about how they didn't exactly know what their future was going to entail in their first couple years together. There's definitely this underdog element that even while you're in Korea, there is this, if you are from a larger company or if you have successful artists in the past for you, there is sort of this, it's an easier road down the line, more or less. But there's definitely this idea that they were the underdogs. Things weren't necessarily at all given to them, much less, it's not guaranteed for anyone, but much less someone from a company as small as they were coming from. And sort of that system was, the odds were not in their favor in that way. So I think there's always been this idea that they were coming at it sort of with the underdog mentality as sort of the one with less chips on their side, and being able to tell those really real stories, being able to talk more about what's important to them. And on one hand, they had the freedom to be able to discuss that in a way, but I also think, it also helped them be special in that way, and again create this sort of arc of being the underdog and standing out in that way.
I think even this week they said, like during Mama, like the award speech, that they recently were considering breaking up, which I thought was an interesting thing. Like they're literally at the height of their career, and for them to feel that way was just kind of fascinating. But just going on the company narrative, they came from, I don't know if people are familiar with Big Hit Entertainment, but it was founded by Bang Si-hyuk, who, I feel like this is something that needs to be talked about more. He wrote some of the most iconic G.O.D. songs. Like, I'm not going to try to say the Korean pronunciation of the song right here because it would be really embarrassing. But One Candle is a really impactful Korean song, and about, that's been used for like the candlelight vigils and everything in Korea. And I think that there's something really important. Like they always credit Bang Si-hyuk in their speeches because I really think he gave them the opportunity to talk about what they want to in these songs, and he's kind of been continuing this chain as a producer over like the past few decades. I think his first song that he's credited with was in 1996. I'd have to double check, but I think that that's a really important thing where it was kind of like a match of a great producer who has stories to tell about young people, giving an opportunity to young people.
Well, I would just add, you know, what I think is so enlightening about what everyone has said about BTS the whole night, really, right, is that they are such these ambassadors of Korea today, right? If Psy kind of like broke the moment where people were like, what? Korea? Pop culture? Rap? What? Dancing? You know, BTS is the group that's really getting young people to know, you know, what South Korea is, giving them a kind of image of this place. And the image is one of acceptance, love yourself, right? Waving a rainbow flag at a performance, right? And again, I would just point out, even if that image is a little bit in dissonance with what is actually happening in South Korea, right? There are not necessarily all of that kind of acceptance and inclusion in South Korea itself, but the brand that's being marketed through the group BTS is one of love yourself and acceptance. And so I think that's a really interesting contradiction, but also, right, a really powerful and effective ambassador of Korea at this moment.
Yes, the BTS's sincerity and I guess their transparency. They try to be transparent with their Burn the Stage documentary for YouTube, the Burn the Stage movie. You get behind scenes, and I was so shocked at the Mama Awards yesterday when Jin said that they were considering disbanding at the beginning of the year, because that's something you don't talk about. You know, you don't let your fans know that you're struggling, but BTS has made that part of their MO about, you know, telling them that this is what I'm struggling with, and it makes them more relatable in that way, I think. And Jeff, you had mentioned this kind of underdog tale, but you know, with Psy, there were obviously stepping stones to this breakout success of BTS. They didn't just come out of nowhere. So you've had the privilege of writing for various outlets, so could you tell us a little bit about some of the trailblazers that helped pave the way for BTS to break through in the U.S.?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, depending on when you became a fan, you can kind of, I think a lot of people have differing opinions on this, but to me, I saw it really as, you know, a layering system. You know, it really was, it felt like people talk a lot about the generations of K-pop, and that every generation kind of was sort of laying the groundwork for the next generation to be able to reach higher and reach more, reach better opportunities when it came to worldwide expansion of K-pop. I think K-pop really, you know, in the early 90s when it was first even starting, was kind of realizing initially that, oh, this could be something larger than, you know, just something that's a phenomenon in our country. You know, maybe this could be exported to other aspects or other countries rather. And I think slowly but surely we saw a lot of amazing opportunities and connections happen, specifically in Japan being the second largest music industry in the world, America being the first. But there was a lot of signs that I think a lot of artists, a lot of opportunity for this music scene could happen in a larger, more impactful way. So we were seeing, you know, not only just those first artists being able to create something that got people excited, got young people excited, but we saw it being exported. We saw a lot of those solo artists like Boa and Rain and Seven be able to kind of make some impacts, and they were small but I think impactful moments. I think it was Rain, right, who was on Colbert, but when he was not even on CBS, but rather
his Times like most voted person of like 2 years in a row.
Right. There were all these kind of hints. Like I was sort of, you know, even as not someone fully in depth into the scene at that point, but realizing that, oh my gosh, there's a lot of excitement around these artists coming here specifically. And, you know, slowly but surely we were seeing, you know, little opportunities for fans to then show that they were actually really excited about this stuff, whether it was voting on a poll or the YouTube numbers or whatever it might have been. Just slowly but surely, I think, you know, this is why I'm just such an advocate first and foremost of just opportunities and you know, inclusion and diversity in that way, because I always said that put K-pop or K-pop has been the specific example, but put that on give them the same opportunity as any of the other pop stars that we have here in America that we think are so huge and big. And these K-pop stars are just the numbers, the statistics, the passion is gonna blow those numbers out of the water, if not just be comparable to them. Because, there was a really significant moment that I thought was really, really impactful was Girls' Generation being nominated at the YouTube Music Awards. I don't even know if they have the YouTube. I don't think they have the YouTube Music Awards anymore. But it was just as you
it
could.
It would just be K-pop awards.
I mean, might as well, right? It was like Girls' Generation was nominated alongside with Justin Bieber and Miley Cyrus and Demi Lovato and Selena Gomez and just
I remember that.
Everyone you could imagine, and it was fan voted. And I think I was just looking at the numbers the other day, and it was like even all the other artists, I think the top 8 through 3 combined didn't even outdo Girls' Generation's numbers. There were a lot of opportunities, just if not. That's the thing. The issue was that there wasn't opportunities. But when there was the opportunity to show that there was interest in this, excitement about it, that these fans came out of the woodwork to, again, just show that they were so interested in it. So I think it started with some solo artists. We were seeing BoA, release the first
and the Wonder Girls.
K-pop, right? BoA, actually 2009, we're almost getting to the 10-year anniversary of it. BoA released her first English album, which was quote-unquote a K-pop album, that charted on the Billboard 200, kind of the first opportunity we saw for a Korean artist in that way. Wonder Girls made an impact with an English version of their Korean song. Those were kind of the first opportunities musically and on the charts that we were seeing. And then slowly but surely we're seeing concerts, we were seeing album sales, we were seeing something like K-Con, a big K-pop festival.
The Wonder Girls movie.
The Wonder Girls movie on Team Nick, yes, exactly. There were these opportunities that were kind of slowly but surely happening. And to me, even if we didn't have, Psy, of course, blew things out of the water a bit and kind of really got people's mind, again, on this idea that, Korean pop music could be really fun and really accessible in that way. But even if we didn't have a visible star like Psy, the numbers, in my opinion, were growing in a healthy way. Again, album sales, touring, something like festival conventions, the social media numbers. These things were growing just so that the groundwork was basically laid for whoever wanted to, make that impact. And I'm so proud and happy just to see where things are nowadays.
As you were talking, I just was sitting here brain spinning, and I kind of got really mad for a second because all this stuff was already there. We knew fans were voting for Rain. Mm-hmm. We knew fans were voting in 2013 for Girls' Generation. We knew that BoA and Wonder Girls, people had been listening to them and buying the albums back in 2009. So I'm just sitting here why did it take so long for BTS to become the one to do it, and why did it take Psy in 2012? And both of these things, obviously these are not the only elements, but both of them relied on people recognizing how popular they were in digital spaces, and digital media became such a powerful, impactful part of our everyday lives. So nowadays, even 5 years ago, social media wasn't something that every single American with a smartphone was tied into deeply. Nowadays, even my dad has a social media account, and my brother is on legal Twitter. I didn't know there was legal Twitter. But just everybody, knows social media, and we recognized how powerful BTS is. We recognized how impactful Psy was, and it kind of those early steps were maybe a little bit too soon for the industry here to really feel we're seeing people. I think there was a cognitive dissonance of who was actually following these, and I think maybe people were unfortunately niching these as, these are just Korean fans. But now, because fans are so visible, I think that's really changed things. There's no denying how impactful these artists are anymore.
And it still happens. I still get editors being this is just international traffic. It's just, and I'm well, what do you mean? You don't sell out Citi Field, or, you don't, BTS sold out, or they were at Good Morning America, and I got to, I saw literally the fans filling up Times Square. Those moments of visibility are so important, and I think for the longest time too, and this is something that I've made such a point, and the writers that I try to surround myself with, they also kind of make these points too, that this has been it's not just about the numbers, it's not just about the followings, it's not just about this like, quick, oh my gosh, look how many people you're gonna get on your website. I really always try to honor and always try to be like, this is something more than just this crazy phenomena. We all know it's so played out, but like the whole screaming fans and the whole crying fans. I knew that word was going to turn you. Trigger you.
Every time I
bad.
read the word screaming, like I was just reading a magazine's year-end list today, and BTS was mentioned, and like the last sentence said something about screaming fans, and I like threw it across my apartment.
Yes, no, that's the
So
thing
mad.
is that I just always wanted to, and like I think that's why I've tried to like keep the good people around me, like these guys up here. Like it's been so much an aspect of just not wanting it to be just this weird phenomenon or whatever it might be, look at the numbers or what. No, like there is something that people are connected to and are getting so excited about. And in a way that I don't think we see with a lot of other music scenes and a lot of music genres. And I think that's the most important part, is the heart of what goes into all of this. And it's unfortunate that I think it's changing, but I think it's still just something that, I feel like I still have to fight for when it comes to coverage.
In music, I think everything is about momentum. And probably that's why when Boa was raising up, even Psy, even they make like a big impact, they didn't really dig so deep like BTS is doing right now. It's because that wasn't the momentum. Like before you had like Boyz II Men, you had Backstreet Boys, you had NSYNC, you had One Direction. When BTS came to the market, One Direction was not really in the market already. So the fans were aiming for that people that could take that spot, and that's what BTA took. Like you got Destiny Child, but before Destiny Child, you got like the Pussycat Dolls, and then Pussycat Dolls were done, then Fifth Harmony, and so on and so forth. So it was a momentum. When BTS came to America, there was no boy band that could perform and sing as well, and that was the need, because we all enjoy that. And doing it so great like they do it, who's not gonna love them? And I'm really happy that they are able to show more than just good choreography and quality and portray a message. But for most Americans and like international fans that doesn't respect that much the Korean culture or the Korean music, they will see, for example, Psy as a parody, like for the dance of Gangnam Style and the horse, and they will like invite him and then like laugh about that. So being able, BTS, for example, as a brand, to show more than quality and being invited to the honor, it's just like so pleased for internationals and also for Koreans to show that we're not a joke. We really deliver a message.
I mean, I think Psy and a lot of the reaction to just K-pop in general for so long, and even now, was Weird Asia. Like the idea that this is something different, that this is too bizarre. Like I still hear people asking me like regularly, like, why do you like them? They look like robots. Like there's such a sense of otherness to this that I think, especially nowadays, BTS fans and K-pop fans in general just totally disregard. And I think in some way it's kind of making it into the narrative where people are becoming more open. We're much more globalized even than, again, a few years ago, because we have this interconnectivity that's hopefully transcending society. But it's kind of ironic when you think about Psy and Gangnam Style, because Gangnam Style was such a critical song of Korea. But like that never translated to anyone. Like I don't think I ever saw, maybe more than a few outlets, like, oh yeah, this song, it's like parodying this neighborhood in Korea. Like that whole narrative was just ignored. And nowadays I think these narratives are becoming so important because people are recognizing that just because you're from another country and you're not speaking the same language doesn't mean that what you're saying isn't worthwhile. So I think that's kind of maybe the most important thing that BTS has done, is making people not only see but also listen.
So talking about this kind of resistance and pushback that some Americans kind of toss at you when you bring up K-pop. When I first started listening to K-pop, I was recording on my VCR. I was recording Music Bank on my VCR, and I was trying to show my friends in middle school, and they were just like, why are you listening to this Chinese music? That was a whole argument. First of all, at that time, this 1998, like China, everything was China, and sadly it's still like that. But I think slowly people are starting to open up to Asia in general and learn about the distinguishing factors in the different cultures. They all look like girls. They're wearing makeup. These really rigid gender expectations. So how have you seen in your personal and professional circles, maybe Dr. Lee, is because this is your academic career, how have you seen K-pop be accepted or not with those you work with?
I think it was 2012 or 2013, I proposed to teach a class called The Politics of Gangnam Style. And, a few of the administrators were like, Gangnam Style? Nobody's going to know what that is. And I was like, I assure you that all NYU students logging on to enroll in classes know what it is, right? And of course, the class was over-enrolled in a heartbeat. I'm happy to say I'm teaching that class again, although the title has now changed to The Politics of K-pop this coming semester, and it's grown to lecture-size class with its A, right? Students have to go to recitation for this class, right? So, I think that really speaks to how K-pop is a generational thing. Literally, parents do not know what it is, and their teenagers, their 20-somethings are obsessed with it, right? It's, again, sort of speaks to the places and spaces where, I'm talking about Americans, of course, right now, where they're enjoying K-pop, which is like on their computer with their friends, right? Somewhere deep and private. And then the other interesting and fascinating thing is that, and then the assumption about the class was that it would be enrolled, by Asian American students or Korean American students, and it was largely non-Asian students, actually, right? So it is this sort of, diverse following of K-pop, and so I think it is a different moment, it's changing and evolving and gaining a kind of recognition beyond that Chinese music, right? Even though that still sort of lingers.
Yeah, I even felt like very early on in my career in writing, it was, I always kind of had to, and I still feel like I have to do it, but prove that K-pop is this thing. I was like, if you can believe it, I had to convince a certain outlet that I work with that a live stream with BTS would be a good idea. And I think I worked on a month to make this happen. And I was like, here are the social numbers, here's the engagement. I can actually, look at the social charts. They're always at the top of it. But there for the longest time, it was just sort of this very big pushback that this thing was never going to happen, that it was not impactful. I had everything from an editor being like, stop trying to make K-pop happen, it's not going to happen. And I was like, what? I know, right? I was like, you know what? I'm going to prove you wrong. Or, even going down to the numbers and the money part of it, being like, well, why would we invest in K-pop if it's just international fans reading this and giving us, that's less ad dollars for us. And I know those things still happen. And it still goes through people's minds, and I'm still, and it's funny because I look at these certain editors or certain people who have been in position, and lots of times it's a lot of white people who kind of older white people who have been sort of closed-minded in that way, and just I don't think that the thought even occurred that something like this could be something that happens in America, because again, we're talking about generations and things like that. The thought I just don't think did not occur. And I've always kind of taken a big, pride in being like, no, this is worth your attention. And if these people aren't going to recognize it and respect it, then, we'll take it somewhere else and, reap the benefits elsewhere. Because I think there is a lot to be able to show with it. And it's amazing that, we at Billboard started as, very, one-off couple articles about K-pop to now we have multiple people who know about this, who are excited about this, who can write about this. It's very cool and very exciting, and the idea that it's not just needs to be this strange off thing that someone needs to translate for someone else and someone needs to be the interpreter anymore. It's sort of like, it's part of the conversation once again. And if I say that, hello, like I write about music and I really like K-pop and it's like my, like little specialty, people are like, oh, I know what that is. It's I don't have to be like, I write about international music, I write about music and I write about international music and I do some stuff in Korea. It's K-pop. If you know what K-pop is, I don't need those steps anymore. People can be like, oh, BTS or whatever it might be. And my hope is that it's not just, oh, BTS, K-pop. It's that it's, oh, I know this whole, beautiful breadth of all these aspects of something that people get excited about in that way. That's hopefully the next goal. But it's been tough for a while, but I'm really happy now.
I think at some point in all international career, like international fans in general, they might feel afraid to say like, oh, I like Korean culture, or I like anime culture, because you probably gonna be afraid that your friends or people that know you are gonna hashtag you like, oh, he's a nerd or oh, he's a weirdo,
I think it definitely used to be like that. Yeah, it's changing.
I could think it's changing, but I just didn't have I don't give a about that because I just trying to be true to myself. If I liked it, I liked it. It's funny though because I have friends like Latinos friends, American friends. They be like, "Oh, you and your chinitos, like you and your like Asians, like." My brother, I think he still doesn't understand that I like K-pop and that I enjoy it, and I just share my stuff. But I think just to resume that, K-pop is like a drug, and I think my friends over there can agree with me. A lot of time you can probably not understand the song because you most likely you don't speak the language, but somehow that music makes you feel happy. Maybe you don't even like the song the first time. You listen 10 seconds, 3 times later, and you're gonna be stuck with the song for the whole week. That's what happened to me with Big Bang. Boom shakalaka, boom shaka, and then that's true. And then it's kind of like an exit door for you to escape and imagine, and then you just accept everything that you can see because everything is so perfect, like the skin, like the view, the video, the concept, the singing, the dance, everything is so perfect. So you kind of like accept everything, and I think like you mentioned it before, K-pop is bringing like an equality and a message for how can I say united people without even been talking about it. Like, hey, I'm do this and I like you because you like K-pop, and that's it. Like we become friends and that's all. It doesn't matter like where you came from, just what you like.
My 11-year-old niece went to her first middle school dance last night, and she texted me and she said they played BTS and she was so excited, And I went to their talent show in June or May, and one of the groups did Mic Drop, the dance. And so it was just amazing to see these little inklings, like how things are changing. People are becoming more open. And you mentioned language. At the Korea Society, we've seen our language program grow immensely because of interests, because of K-pop. Could you speak to, language learning, how that's involved in being a fan of K-pop, and how K-pop can kind of open the door and inspire people to further explore Korean culture and language?
I think I mentioned this earlier in my intro. Like I actually got into K-pop and then changed my entire life. I ended up, my dad's a lawyer, my brother is a lawyer. We're super New York Jews, and I thought I was going to go be a lawyer because I didn't really have anything else I wanted to do. And I was just sitting there one day listening to K-pop, and as I said, my professor came over and was like, "Why aren't you taking Korean 101? It's starting this semester." It's like, "Oh, well, I mean, I don't really need to know the lyrics or anything." So then I ended up pursuing a degree in East Asian Studies and studying abroad at Yonsei. I have spent a lot of time in Korea. I speak Korean really badly. I actually took restarted classes at the Korea Society. I really hate speaking Korean in front of Koreans. The other day I was doing an interview. And they don't, I try to let artists know that I speak some Korean, but often they don't get it. And so they'll say jokes or something or really surprised when I laugh or respond to them in Korean or something. And so now I just don't do anything because it's become just too embarrassing when I catch them doing something. But I think it's really wonderful. I've met so many friends because 3 of my closest friends here in New York actually studied abroad with me in fiance. One of them's from Australia, one of them's from LA, and the other one's from Shanghai. But we all, ended up going to Korea, whether it was because we liked K-pop or K-dramas. And like, it's not just like, yeah, we like K-pop and we like K-dramas. Honestly, at the time, it was like a rule, like an unspoken rule, that you didn't tell the college students at Yonsei that like you were there because you like K-pop, because it was so embarrassing. Like, you didn't like want them to know you're one of those like exchange students. No, I'm just here because I'm studying X, Y, and Z. Like, but like at the same time, like I don't know if anybody's familiar with Yonsei, but like they have a huge festival every year that's called Akaraka, and like they had Psy and Girls' Generation at ours. Like, it was such a cool experience to feel like, oh, this thing that like I never spoke to any of my high school friends about, like that I liked. So not only now is it my career, but in college I was able to meet friends through like language program and through my study abroad experience who not only like liked it, but also understood like why I liked it and why, like I decided not to just study, like I didn't just study K-pop in college. Like my degree was far more encompassing. We didn't actually have any. Queens College didn't have a Korean studies program until I was like a junior. So like I wasn't even studying anything, but it was just such a nice breath of fresh air to like be studying something that I had no familiarity with. And a lot of people, this year especially, it's become a question that I keep getting asked more and more. Like, you're a white Jew from New York, why are you covering K-pop? And the answer is, well, partially because newsrooms in the US are kind of racist, and I don't know many Korean Americans who would cover K-pop. And the other answer is because K-pop's audience isn't just Korean. Like, most of my friends who like K-pop, they aren't necessarily Korean, or if they are, they're Korean American. And the audience isn't just doesn't have a single face, doesn't have a single color to it. And I think that's something that's really important, because I think K-pop is really special in a way that it really does introduce many Americans especially, but many people from around the world, to Korean culture and different viewpoints. And like we're kind of like evading it a little bit about how K-pop doesn't really represent Korea and Korea society. And I think that's something that a lot of fans end up struggling with, which is that Korea does have issues with, like same-sex equality, with gender equality, with racism. And I think that's something that like fans learn, and they try to learn how to deal with, because seeing a different viewpoint that's so different from your own. Like, so many times there was just a really big blow up about a shirt worn by a BTS member, and that turned into a hat worn by a BTS member that had some Nazi paraphernalia on it. And like, it was such a weird moment for me, because as I mentioned, I'm Jewish, and like people were texting me like, why aren't you more upset about like this Nazi hat? And I was just like, okay, well, here's some historical background. Like, I had a conversation with one friend who's a big K-pop fan, and she's like, why would he ever wear it? And I was like, well, would you wear a rising sun hat? And she was like, I don't know what a rising sun is. I like could not have set up this conversation better. And it was just like such an interesting moment for me, because it had shown me how far I had come from how the narrative that I know about like World War II was, to the degree where I was really analyzing certain aspects of this whole scandal, which was really big, and I'm not going to go into this, was just like I was able to change my perspective from literally being a Jew who grew up studying the Holocaust, going to Poland. I went to death camps, and I was able to be like, yeah, I'm not so super upset about this K-pop star wearing a Nazi hat. Like, it was really weird.
I'm Jewish as well. It was an interesting time. I had very similar reaction.
And just like, I think that change of perspective is something that came out of like, oh, I liked K-pop. I ended up studying all this stuff, and yeah, like I'm not super happy with the Nazi hat. I'm gonna put it out there, but like I could see why I'm not going to be super mad. But just that change of perspective, like I really had to sit down for a while and be like, oh, I'm so far from like the little 15-year-old who didn't know anything about the world because of like me just randomly finding like Wonder Girls on YouTube one day.
And I always say K-pop has been sort of, and I don't know if I'm getting too off track or anything, but I always say that like K-pop's sort of been this like journey in like empathy, not even just realizing, strictly for business or media, or how to, conduct it so the U.S. side of the media is happy, but also so the Korean side of the media is happy, and how to find this middle ground so that we can kind of both see eye to eye in that way. But also just, the way that music and art can sort of be this sort of leveler and sort of this equalizing force in that way, and something similarly, when I was going through that and analyzing certain things, I saw a lot of people, and this is how I knew BTS was so famous, because they were having a ridiculous scandal about their clothes from a year ago, and not that it was so ridiculous necessarily, but that I was like, the media is just hounding on them because of this one thing, and they think it's a sexy story, and they think it's a controversial and a scandalous story, so they're going to go with it. But no one was really taking the time to analyze what was going into it, or the cultural impact or the cultural history behind all this. And something like that was where it felt like, okay, this is where this is where the years of hopefully work come through, is that it's been years of kind of understanding and hopefully empathizing and hopefully understanding and respecting both sides of the culture, and being able to say, okay, this is how we can all kind of wrap our head around it in that way. And so I had similar moments too, where it was just kind of like, wow, like I did not think I would think like this, but it felt very, I don't know how you felt, Tamar, but it felt like very like unique, a uniquely unique experience to me, like in that way.
Actually, I spoke out against like the Simon Wiesenthal Center like issued this really ridiculous statement that didn't really. There was a lot of issues here, and there was some stuff going on with internet trolls, and like it's really so much that I spent 2 days I'm a freelancer. Spending 2 days on an article that I don't think will ever get published is literally the biggest waste of time. Like that's making me not pay my rent. But I felt that it was really important to try to figure out the right thing to say. So I spent that week, everything happened kind of on Sunday, Monday morning, and then Tuesday I spent the whole day trying to come up with something. I came with 6,000 words of what I wanted to say on this, and I showed it to a friend, and my friend was like, you cannot publish this. Like, this will ruin your career. It will ruin everything you've built, because like it was just too, not even emotional, but like your perspective is so different from the narrative that the media wants to tell about this shirt and this hat and what's going on, that like it will not be a benefit to you. So like calm down, like go back and think. So I spent Wednesday I was covering stuff like normal, and then Thursday I spent another day on an article, and I personally think this is the best article I've ever written in my entire life. I submitted it to the New York Times and nothing happened, and I said, okay, you know what, like it's Thursday, this happened on Sunday, I'm gonna let this go. So, but I was so happy, like I was saying to a friend, I was so happy that I figured out what I wanted to say about this. It doesn't matter that nobody's gonna read it. Like people were literally hounding me, why aren't you saying anything about this? Like why are you not saying anything? Like you should be writing on this. And the fact of the matter is I tried to write something about it, and I thought at the end of the day that this was a situation that needed to be handled so gently. I turned down a Jewish outlet that asked me to write something about it because I didn't think that they would ever be happy with what I wanted to say. And that was such a tough moment for me. Like so many people were saying, oh, you're like you can handle this. This is something that you know so much about. Like you're so unique, you could do this. And I was just sitting there like, I don't think I can, and I don't. Maybe I kind of like set myself up for disaster here, and I talked myself out of it, but it was such a unique situation that I felt this is so important not to handle badly. It's better not to handle it at all. And I don't know if that was the right decision. And I still like am thinking like, oh, maybe I should have posted that article on Medium. Like maybe I should have published it. Maybe I should have asked my editors like at Billboard or Forbes, like, do you want to look at this? But it was such a tough personal thing for me to go on the record and say, so I think this is really racist, and this is really not understanding like the Asian perspective of World War II. Like this is you're being Eurocentric and Americentric right now. And going on the record and saying that, I didn't know how to do it without having like the biggest name in media like backing me. And so after the New York Times turned it down, I was just like, okay. Like it was such a scary moment. And I think I might regret it for a while, but also at the same time, like I'm still happy that I was able to write that just for me. But I think that it said a lot about kind of like how K-pop in general is here. Like as Jeff said, it was a sexy story. So there was a whole lot of talking about. There was a few outlets that talked about like some of the historical perspectives, but it was mostly this is the narrative and this is how we learn it in the US and this is why it's wrong. But I wasn't seeing that from fans. Like fans like X, Y, and Z. They were saying, well, okay, X, Y, and Z, but also ABC. Like we need to like understand that not dealing with America. We're not dealing with the Western narrative of World War II, which was a lot of this stuff was about. Like, there was one of the things that I literally laughed when I saw this. There was a criticism that BTS was performing like a Sotaeji's cover song with like fascist trappings. And I thought it was hilarious because I was just like, if you know anything like about anything, like that is definitely not what's happening here. Like, of all the things for you to be saying, like, so the Sotaeji song is definitely not pro-fascism, but there was no like moment, even not like to look at the historical perspective, but like people weren't even looking to see what was going on because they were so into the idea of what they thought was happening. Like, there was such a lack of critical storytelling with this one story that I thought was so. This is gonna put report another few years, like, and that was a really sad moment. But I think in some ways, on a personal level, I felt like I advanced at least, even though I didn't publish the thing. But I just think that it said a lot about what we wanted from K-pop stories, and what we wanted from K-pop stories was big stories that's really dramatic, and if they're not super happy, we're just gonna tell the exact same super sad thing. And I think just because we're kind of coming to the anniversary of it, like the passing of Jonghyun from SHINee last year, like there was a lot of narratives going on, and there was a lot of touching on it about, you know, like stress in Korea and suicide rate in South Korea, but nobody was really talking about it. Like, I was reached out by a major news outlet and I turned them down because I said, you shouldn't be talking to me. You should be talking to somebody like a psychologist from South Korea. You should be talking to somebody who knows the industry. Like, I'm a reporter. I don't know anything about this. Like, this is not me. You should be talking to somebody who is more familiar with this. Like, this is not my place to be talking about this. And I think, and like their response was, okay, we'll just get somebody else who covers K-pop in the US. I was like, I'm literally telling you that you're not doing enough research. Like, you're not going, not even the distance, like you're not even putting in the bare effort to try to tell the narrative in a respectful way, because your idea of the narrative is so set. And sorry, I kind of went off on a really boring tangent, but I think that that's kind of like a big problem that we have right now, is that there's a narrative, and if you want to explore like the larger narrative, like I got, I don't know if anybody was familiar with this like month, like there's a rapper in Korea who released a few really vitriolic songs about feminists, and the feminist movement in Korea is like a whole big ball of fun and stress and anger, and there's a lot going on, but pretty much he got like his contract canceled with his company, and I wanted to just write an article on that, like, hey, this guy released a song called Feminist, and he got booed at a concert because he was being misogynistic, and like it was gross, and his company ended up canceling his contract. And for some reason, because we couldn't get a statement from his company, my editors were just like, okay, we're not going to run this story. Like, you're not going to run this story about somebody who's being misogynistic because, like, and getting his career, you know, canceled, because why? The answer was, officially it was, because we don't have the statement directly from the company, even though they had it on their social media. But the real reason, I think, was, you know, it's too touchy. That's not the narrative we're telling about Korean entertainment industry right now.
I think the silver lining of, you know, scandals like that is fans have been forced to kind of think critically about where they source their information from. Specifically the BTS scandal, I know a lot of ARMY fans were doing their own independent research about Korea's tumultuous relationship with Japan historically, and they had no idea about, you know, comfort women, about the Japanese colonialization of Korea. And so, you know, the silver lining is that a lot of people were educated after the fact. I did want to ask you, you know, going forward, you know, what do you hope to see in K-pop, in the coverage of K-pop? How do you want this conversation to redirect itself more positively?
More positively? Like, personally, I don't necessarily think the conversation needs to be more positive. I think the conversation needs to be more critical. Not necessarily critical, like negative critical,
I should say more,
but like I think more balanced. I think that so many times, like, we get content, like we do a lot of video interviews at Billboard with K-pop stars, and so many times, like, I'll hear from a video producer, like, oh, I'm not sure if I really like that. I'm like, well, why don't you like that? Like, why don't you tell us beforehand what you want from this video rather than like do this every single time. Because you know that this is a different industry. You have to understand, I guess, cultural differences of business cultures really is something that I think the American industry right now is learning about Korean media culture, and it's kind of a culture shock for a lot of people here. So I guess like just a lot of people are asking like, why is there no investigative reporting in K-pop? And I'm literally sitting here like, I just when I was just in Seoul, and I just happened to be invited to the Asian American Journalists Association had their year-end party, and someone heard I was in town, and they were like, "Do you want to come?" And I was like, "Well, I'm not Asian American." They were like, "Just come anyway." And so I had a bunch of journalists who were like, "How do you get interviews?" I'm like, "What are you talking about?" They're like, "Well, every time there's a big news story, we try to cover." Like these were major outlets, journalists like CNN, Bloomberg, like Korea. Yonhap was there, and they like every single reporter asked me, "How do you get the interviews?" And I was like, "What are you talking about?" They're like, "We regularly send interview requests. We regularly send just statement requests, and we get absolutely radio silence because it's not the thing to do about K-pop to report on something that might be remotely negative." And I think that in the U.S. we also don't do that to some degree. Like, yes, we do report on these things, but we don't really look into them in the deeper analysis of them. And I think that's something that like we could be doing. And I think that, honestly, I think that's something that I think if the Korean music industry really wants to move into the US market more and move into the global music market more, it needs to be open to, which is like kind of demanding, but like BTS is able to move into the market because, they were willing to do a lot of really small interviews early on. Like they were literally going on, I think they did a one interview with like Chicago Public Access, like a TV show. Like I could not imagine any other K-pop group saying, "Yeah, sure, we'll go on like PBS." Like they just wouldn't do it. Like they wouldn't understand why it's important to try to engage this other audience. And I think that's just like a general shift towards being more open, both from media side of things and from K-pop side of things, will be how really like K-pop can thrive in the global music scene.
K-pop market combines the singing, the music, the dance, the acting. A lot of time you have the idols that you love in those dramas, and I feel like I love the music. That's how I started, but I believe in the music videos there are a lot of fiction, but in the drama you get like another face of Korea, which is mostly part of the culture. You can see their costumes, you can see their mountains, scenography, everything. So I think through the dramas, the Korean culture gets to explore and showcase internationally how important is their manners. And I think, for example, today I'm doing a career surrounded by Asians, and I think they love me. I hope they do. As it's part of the respect that you learn through those dramas. How to respect the adults, how to talk to them, the manners that you have when you go in. You don't really get that when you watch the videos from the idol, but you can explore that when you can enjoy the dramas, and then you admire. And that's why, for example, as an international fan, you are kind of like a wheel to explore to others non-Korean fans that thinks they are Chinese. To them, no, they are not Chinese. And please, for example, I had a lot of friends, and don't refer to them. If you don't know their ethnicity, just say Asian, because they may get offended. And simple manners like respectfulness and stuff like that. And I think Korean-wise, the dramas are the biggest way to connect with the culture.
Well, I would just wanted to kind of sum up and add on to what you were saying. If you remember, Psy's, year of fame ended because, news outlets were reporting that he was involved in anti-U.S. military protests, right? And much of the reporting, 99% of the reporting, didn't ask why Psy was protesting the U.S. military or why Koreans were protesting the U.S. military, but there were a couple articles that went deep into that topic and into the historical relationship between the U.S. and South Korea, that went into the cases, right, of, you know, the two young girls being, you know, run over by the military vehicle, et cetera, et cetera. And I think what Tamar is saying is that, right, this relationship between K-pop and the media, it gives us opportunities to tell these histories that are often not exposed in U.S. mainstream media, right? And of course, it's a hard fight, hard battle to get these stories published, and I admire you two for doing that work, right? I mean, scholarship is a whole nother thing, right? We publish these books, but like 10 people read it. You know, that's our job to say these things, but we don't have as big of an audience, right? Your challenge is a much more uphill battle, but I think if we look at it that way, right, that it gives us the opportunity to tell these stories about the U.S. and South Korea that the U.S. doesn't want to tell about itself, right? And sometimes that South Korea doesn't want to tell about itself, right? But that is sort of what good journalism is, and I think that's kind of the heart at which you two were speaking of, what you were trying to say.
Yeah, I mean, I just, you know, personally, kind of going off that as well, it's exactly what I want. I want this music scene to be treated in the same way that the dark and the light all to be kind of given that same equal platform. I think, you know, hip-hop music, for example, has been so important to the Black community, not only to share what uniquely comes from them and from that community, but also help share, you know, create so many conversations about what's happening in this community, happening in this minority. I think music and can be such a pivotal piece and such an important part of starting these conversations. And it's why when, you know, I kind of, when people ask what I do, I kind of downgrade myself. I'm like, oh, I write about pop stars all day. But, you know, I really think it's important. I really think it's influential. And I think it can be influential in so many more ways than it's just pop stars or whatever. I think there's so much more that music can represent and can magnify and help us understand, not only about one another, but just about people completely different to us. And I do hope that, you know, future K-pop coverage and the way that it's sort of consumed and understood, it gets to have that equal opportunity, that it's not just sort of this, you know, whatever I can't even keep track of these days of what the narrative of K-pop is, but, you know, I think it's that, you know, on one hand, people talk about it's like another One Direction sort of thing, but I think there's so, you know, this isn't, don't just try to like fit it into the equal, you know, containers that, you know, the container that you already understand. You know, there's so much more to be understood, and there's so much more to look into past just, you know, what you might have understood in the past. And I think that's why it took such a long time for this moment to sort of be happening and happen in this way, is because there wasn't any type of path blazed before in any kind of way. So it was going to be a bumpy road to get there, and I think it's still going to be a bumpy road, but ideally the good stuff continues to, the cream rises at the top in that way. And yeah, I'm very excited just kind of what this, I think music's in a really exciting place. I think Latin music had a huge year last year. I think K-pop is having a big year this year. People are opening up their minds to this idea of global music and what's happening in music, and having it represent something larger than just a catchy song.
There's something funny. Like, despite the K-pop, it's helping the Korean culture to, for example, expand their culture, but also the language. Have you realized that most likely when K-pop song has English, they're most appealing to international fans than when they don't have it. So I think one of the biggest reasons why today's idols are more popular in America is because they're also able to communicate in English in a way that we can understand, and they can transmit their feelings. And probably the impact that BTS is having, thanks to that Red Monster, is being able to be like the international translator of the team, is that he expressed their feelings of the team. Other boy bands and girl groups that have like probably longer careers and as good as they are, but they have like that barrier with to express themselves. They cannot do it. So I think even English has helped to the Korean culture to be so bigger now.
And this year alone, we've seen many crossovers with Latin and Korean
GOT7.
artists. GOT7, Lo Siento with Super Junior. So
NCT.
I think this is a really beautiful time in our history to see, people from different cultures coming together to make beautiful music that's celebrated all over the world. And so to talk about more of a, happy thing, if you had to pick one song to introduce a non-K-pop fan to...
Oh, Lo Siento.
I was about to say that.
Lo Siento.
So
Do you know the
yeah.
choreography, Asri? Girl, how you say you don't?
So you would be Super Junior Lo Siento, that would be your choice?
Yes,
Okay.
I think it's like a bridge song that, I don't know, just unify Latin and American community into the Korean market. Everybody that has listened to it is like, my friends like, oh, who was that song? Okay. Yeah, I think that song is, but before that song came out, I would say TVXQ, Mirotic. Yeah, that song is a jam.
What would your recommendations be?
Oh, I was gonna say Lo Siento also because I just have so many friends. No, because I feel like really last year, as Jeff just said, was like the year of like Latin music rise in the U.S. and this year was K-pop and like Lo Siento and Otra Vez, which Super Junior did with Rake. Like I literally had a friend call me who I had worked with like years ago, and she was like, "So my favorite boy band and Super Junior just did a song together," and I'm just like. I was like, they're your favorite boy band? And she's like, I was listening to them since I was little. But I just think that it was really, like, those two songs this year were really good show of, like, the potential for K-pop, not just in the Western market, like, not just in, like, the English-speaking market, but also, like, the capacity for it to grow. Otherwise, this
Forget
year...
America.
Yeah, like, just go to
Who
Latin
needs it?
America. But also, this year, I'm really, really, really into BTS's I'm Fine and Anpan Man, and, like, I just got to see them. I was just in Japan, and I saw them perform at Mama Anpan Man, and I just thought it's such a fun song. Like, I mean, I don't think it's for everybody, but, like, right now, that's my big suggestion.
I'm so old. My favorite song always and forever to introduce people to K-pop is 21, I'm the Best.
Oh, wait.
Like, it just always works. People just love that song because it's so good.
I was just thinking of this year, but if we're gonna go with like our favorite song ever to introduce people, Jeff is like laughing. Jeff is like laughing because he knows exactly what I'm gonna say. Because like I post on Twitter about this like once a month that it's still not on Apple Music.
Only once a month.
It's probably more. Infinite's The Chaser. Like I think it's one of the best songs I've ever heard in my entire life, and like you should go listen to it and then go watch the video where they perform it with like a full orchestra. It's just like an insanely glorious listening experience.
I love that. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely changed throughout the years. I think I think it also depends on the audience you're going for. Like, it depends like who. I always try to I always say like, oh, I have my K-pop syllabus, ready for you. But I do think.
Can I borrow it for my class?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, no problem. I think I do still feel like Big Bang's Fantastic Baby is like a really good one. Like, just as like a go-to one. Like, it just sort of like. It starts with this really energetic, bass line to it, and it kind of just keeps growing in its own way. I think, if you're really feeling ambitious, Girls' Generation, I Got a Boy, with its many genre shifts and tempo shifts, like, will really smash them over the head in the best way possible. Blackpink's Boombayah is another one I've been going to lately. So, I don't know. I mean, I really do.
Red
feel
Velvet's
too-
Bad Boy has been a big one I've been suggesting
You know
this
what?
year.
I did that one. And
Fire,
BTS is gonna, yeah. Dope is a really good. You were talking about Dope, yeah. Dope is the one I recently showed, just like my random
That's
little
my
friend.
respect. That's another song.
Yeah,
The
it was so good.
most like people I've met recently who started listening to like K-pop or BTS, like they say Dope is like the song that does it. So like I really want like someone to do a survey on like why Dope, but it is dope. Like it's always people are like it's dope, and I'm like, oh okay, like I've heard that before.
And it's weird because it wasn't even that big of a hit in Korea necessarily, but it just kind of became this sort of international moment for
The
them
thing that
in that
captures
way.
you.
It's kind of like a
Yeah.
bridge between what American music should be doing. You guys have one K-pop song that you introduce your fans, like non-fans to K-pop?
Mm.
Dope. How about you? Ooh,
Spring
okay.
Day. Ooh, unique.
Which one?
Love it.
I think Dope, I mean, I remember the first time I saw Dope, I was at Iowa Women's University, we were getting a lecture on rappers, underground rappers versus idol rappers. And they were talking
Reporting on
about the
that.
legitimacy of idol rappers, and are they really considered hip hop if they don't necessarily write their own lyrics, or if they don't, if they're not, dissing someone. And so I saw the video and I was just like, this choreography. I mean, the choreography is what got me hooked on K-pop in the first place. When I saw Music Bank all those years ago, I saw like 20 backup dancers, and I was so intrigued, and I've always loved to dance, so that choreography, the learning aspect, and it helps you to appreciate the music because you can hit, every beat. And so I think dope. I mean, there's just so many great things about that video. We could talk about it all day.
Like you mentioned, it all depends the fans or the friends that you want to introduce,
Exactly.
Like, for example, right now, you got a friend, and I put, like, Hyun Dolly, it's going to be, like, in shock.
Jolin, yeah.
Or, again, I had one vocal coach that I introduced him, Sohyun.
There's
He
something
loves
for
seeing it.
everyone in K-pop.
shocked.
I think I have
Ailey.
coworkers. So my coworkers are all Korean or Korean American. None of them like K-pop. So I've made it my personal mission to find out what they like, what kind of music they like, so I can recommend appropriately. And so, like, even my parents, my dad is a big Stevie Wonder fan. So when, Love Yourself Tear came out, I was like, you have to listen to these R&B tracks. You have to, and he loves the melodies. He tries to learn Korean phrases so that he can use it with any Korean that he meets.
So
And it's just, I think it's such a beautiful thing to bring people together. And I really hope that people can be more open. Because when people tend to shut down sometimes when they have this idea of what K-pop is or what it's capable of.
One of
My friends, when I go to hell, no, don't come in with that.
one of the first articles that I sold, which I was really excited about, was for Paste Magazine, and it was like 10 K-pop albums for non-K-pop fans. And I got really excited because it was like, oh, I can like trick you guys all into listening to really good K-pop albums. So like I gotta suggest like some Akmu and IU, and then I put in like a 21 album and some Shiny stuff. I think I put in a TVXQ album, and people were just like reading this and like, this is all like so mainstream K-pop. I was like, that's the point. Like, it's not that you don't like it. It's that like, I think I had a really interesting conversation. I think it was yesterday or Thursday with somebody about how SM Entertainment boy bands have like underratedly the best B-sides, like really good ballads and really good R&B songs. And like, if you're just looking at the singles of K-pop, like that's really good for like the visual, like YouTube music video elements. But if you actually want to hear the music, like you really need to go listen to albums, which is why our album of the year charts things are really important to us. But I just think albums are underratedly a big thing in K-pop, and not just because like they're collector's items, but because these albums actually have depth to them that the singles do in different ways. But I think that like I think my favorite conversation having is we mentioned like Lo Siento for Super Junior. My favorite Super Junior song is It's You. It's like almost a power ballad, and like to say that to people, they're like, oh, it must be Sorry Sorry, like you must like Bonamana, like everyone just knows Super Junior is this dance group, but like if you go to their concerts, they're mostly like singing like sweet evocative R&B songs. Like it's just a really interesting dichotomy where like the singles are just the like touching like on the layer and then like touching on the top of things, and like you really have to dig deep in the discographies if you want to hear what a band is. And I think that's something that like people should listen to more. Albums, go buy some.
Well, Billboard just released their top 100 songs of 2018. Rolling Stone also released theirs, and BTS's Fake Love was on both of those lists, which is super impressive. So I'm really excited to see what the future holds for K-pop here in America. But, I mean, we were joking, like, who cares about America? I mean, at this point, with technology the way it is, like, it's not all about what we think. Latin American fans love K-pop. Chile, Brazil, they're begging
Biggest
BTS to
consumer.
come.
They just announced
to
SM Town, Chile, like yesterday.
So are there any future projects we should look out for? How can we get in touch with you? How can we follow you?
Well, I get the chance to win a scholarship, so I'm aiming to next year go to Korea for one semester at Sejong University. So please check on me and share for me. I hope, make big steps over there. Thank you.
I mentioned this earlier, but I have a book coming out this spring in April called Fashion and Beauty in the Time of Asia. It's out with New York University Press. Buy a copy if you're so inclined. And I am, of course, my email is available on the New York University website, Department of Social and Cultural Analysis.
I'm continuing as usual with like my work for Billboard and Forbes, and I mentioned I have a big project that I'm not allowed to announce right now, but it's really, really exciting, and that should be coming out sometime as late next year, but it'll be announced soon. And in the meantime, I have a bunch of interviews coming out. So I just spoke to Blackpink's Jennie, and that just went up yesterday. I have upcoming interviews with Epic High, IZ*ONE, 17, and New East W. I don't know, those are some big things that are coming up like in the next few weeks. You can contact me at tamarhermanwrites@gmail.com, or follow me on Twitter also at tamarwrites.
Yeah, I hope just as this K-pop thing continues to get bigger and better, that I just hope that I can continue to do the stories that are important and kind of expand people's minds. And I have some things coming up that I'm really, really excited about, and I just want to keep, pushing it in a larger, wider capacity, just to further open the aperture about just what this culture and what this music scene can show. So I'm really, really excited about some things coming up, and I think 2019 is going to be a great year for all of us, and hopefully everyone here as well. And yeah, I think you can totally follow my writing, and hopefully it's all over the place, but I do lots of stuff for Billboard and for Forbes and lots of different places like that. And I love Twitter and Instagram, and you can always email me anytime. I love talking to people about this stuff, and yeah, it's awesome to be here.
So you can find me on Twitter at Kpop_historian. Last week we had our final K-pop 101 series at the Korea Society with Heijin. It was Gender Politics of K-pop. So I really hope to have a more balanced and even critical, when necessary, view of K-pop. There are many topics to discuss. As much as we love K-pop, there are also some dark sides. So I hope to continue to offer programs here in New York. So follow me on Twitter to see what I'm up to. But thank you all for your attention and for your wonderful questions.
Yeah.
And I hope you have a great evening. Thank you. Oh, and thank you to our panelists.
Yeah, for love.
Thank you. Thank you, Open Forum.